Tom, that's the thing that I keep coming back to, the 90%. Him telling Pat that he was 90% retired before. Did he do the full 4 days? It feels like he only did half that. But so is he playing this year out of spite for Green Bay and Brian Gutekunst essentially, or what's your sense there?
Well, there's going to be, I assume, in this press conference that starts at the top of the hour, a Seinfeld-type moment of, Aaron, are you doing this for spite? No, I'm doing this because of all the right reasons, want to play, want to win. Well, you kind of already said spite. We're not going to allow you to go back on that. I mean, I had the same impression when I heard that initial interview that he feels like he's got something to prove. But he's also, I've always found him to be a very internally motivated human in terms of, again, he's complicated and he thinks about things in different ways. And people can disagree with his opinions at times, but you at least know that whatever he's saying, whatever he's, the way he's acting, it's coming from this place of meditation and self-reflection. So I think that on a base level, he's doing this because he really feels inside him it's the right thing to do. But to the extent that he felt jilted by the Packers, that they weren't just willing to sit around and wait for him, I think there's absolutely some motivation there. And from the Packers' perspective, based on what Brian Gutekunst has said publicly, you understand their perspective too. I mean, they were trying to get a hold of him, to visit him, to just have the conversation, not of the, hey, we're moving on conversation, the, hey, organizationally, we got to do some things differently here. Maybe some of your buddies aren't going to be back. Maybe we're not going to bring back the Cobbs and the Mercedes Lewises, the Mason Crosbys. We may have to move on from some other high-priced players. Like, do you want to be a part of this? And can you be all in? And are you going to show up for the offseason? And are you going to work with these young receivers? Like, they never got to have that conversation. I think there's some disappointment in that, but some credit to Brian Gutekunst and Russ Ball and those guys for doing the contract the way that they did, because it did build in the flexibility, even though when they signed him last year for, basically it was 3 years and $150+ million, they built it in such a way that they had that late vesting option bonus, and they didn't have a ton of bonus proration into the future. They're going to eat, based on the restructure they did yesterday to facilitate the trade, about $40.3 million, I think it is, this year in dead cap space, but they will have no dead cap for Aaron Rodgers in 2024 and beyond. They owe Aaron Rodgers $0 additional dollars. They will pay him no cash this year. So from a cash perspective, they're already out of it. From a cap perspective, they'll be out of it next year. And we'll see what the final contract ends up being with the Jets here, too, because right now, based on that restructure yesterday, he's on paper for $1.2 million this year and 107 point something million next year. Pretty confident that's not what the final contract's going to be. So we'll get those answers in a couple of days.
So what do these teams do in the draft? What does Green Bay do at 13, and what do you anticipate the Jets doing at 15?
It's a great question, Brockman, because, at 13, the ultimate heel turn for the Packers, of course, would be you draft a receiver. Aaron never had a receiver, drafted in the first round the whole time that he's the starting quarterback, and everybody talks about that, even though, they drafted the Jordy Nelsons of the world early in the second round, and he was a pretty darn good player for him for a long time. But it would just be a fantastic type of a development if that's what they did. But you also know that Gutekunst isn't thinking through that lens. I do think receiver's a possibility at 13 for them. I think tight end, with Robert Tonyan not being back there and how they want to use tight ends in that offense, I think that is a possibility. And they potentially could be in the offensive line bucket as well. Just because, with David Bakhtiari's knee, he's not played a lot over the last couple of years. They have to hedge their bets, at least to a certain degree. They got really good young players, like Josh Nijman, who has played every different position. But they may need to have an upgrade there. And for the Jets at 15, you're just hoping, if you're Joe Douglas and those guys, that moving back 2 spots doesn't cost you one of those top tackles in the draft, because those guys are going to go fast. Paris Johnson, from everyone I've talked to, is going to go high. Skoronski, who most people have as a guard, is going to go high from Northwestern. The Tennessee guy, Darnell Wright, and the Georgia player, Broderick Jones, all those guys potentially could go in the first 14 picks, because you got a run of teams right there. Tennessee, Green Bay, New England, all could use offensive line help.
Right.
So if those guys are gone with the Jets, you trade back, you take an Anton Harrison a little bit later. I just have to think they've done a lot of work. Joe Douglas has done a great job. Last year's draft class, potentially, if they win a Super Bowl this year, all the talk will be about Aaron. But a lot of it will be they got studs with those first 4 picks last year. I would certainly think that, there's a lot of things that are on the table, but getting some additional help up front, especially with the injuries they went through last year on the offensive line, has to be top of mind in New York.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.